고기가 부드러워야지 맛있으니까 좀 오랫동안 끓여서 전체적인 살을 좀 부드럽게. 저 일단 매운 고추는 별로 안 좋아해서 저는 오이고추 좋아하거든요. 오이고추 쌈장 많이 찍어서 딱 먹으면은 이제 고기랑 이제 입안에서 딱 어우러지는 맛이 그게 최고 맛있죠. 삼계탕이 익을 때 그 보글보글 하면서 이 공기방울이 생기잖아요. 계속 뚝배기 안 나오면 이 보글보글함이 없거든요. 음식도 간 만든 게 맛있는데 이거는 지금도 만들고 있는 느낌이 들기 때문에 어릴 때도 그랬는데 그 빗소리 들으면 마음이 편안해지는 것처럼 힘들고 지친 게 싹 사라지는 느낌이 들거든요. 항상 그 보글보글 소리가 마음을 편안하게 해주고 전쟁터에서 뭔가 쉬는 곳으로 왔구나라는 느낌을 딱 주는 것 같아요. 특히 삼계탕은 어떻게 하면은 이 먹는 사람이 더 힘을 낼까 하는 마음에 만드는 요리이기 때문에 정성이 더 많이 들어가게 되는 것 같아요. 그렇기 때문에 더 맛난 거겠죠. 제가 좋아하는 재료가 밤이어가지고 그 밤 한 알, 두 알 정도는 마지막에 최대한 아껴두다가 딱 먹는 스타일입니다. 촬영 시작 전부터 삼계탕만 그려지고 있어요. 오늘 삼계탕 먹어야 될 것 같아요.
In our headlines on this Tuesday, March 10th, here in South Korea, Trump claims his military operation against Iran is, quote, very complete and could be, quote, over soon, even as Iran appears to align behind a new hardline supreme leader. Meanwhile, the local stock market regains ground as global oil prices ease in response to Mr. Trump's words of reassurance about the fate of the unrest in the Middle East. And President Lee Jae-myung suggests a supplementary budget to ease the impact of the events in the Middle East on the South Korean economy. We start with the most recent remarks by the U.S. President with regard to the fate of his military operation against Iran. Our Park Jun-han reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Monday told members of the press in Florida that the war with Iran is nearing its end and that it's the beginning of building a new country.
They were going to take over the Middle East and they were going to try and destroy Israel. So we stopped it with good timing, and we're very proud to be involved in this, and it's going to be ended soon. And if it starts up again, they'll be hit even harder.
Following a reporter's question about what he meant when he stated that the U.S. was already victorious but had not won enough, Trump said that ultimately he wanted to stop Iran from having the capacity to develop weapons that could be used to strike the U.S., Israel, or any U.S. allies. He also reiterated that Iran was preparing to strike U.S. allies and attempt to take over the Middle East if the United States had not acted first. Trump also said he spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Monday regarding the settlement of conflicts in the Middle East and between Russia and Ukraine. He said Putin wants to be helpful with the situation in the Middle East and added that he told Putin that being helpful would be ending the war with Ukraine. Since the war started on February 28th, U.S. and Israeli strikes have hit military command centers, nuclear sites, missile and air defense facilities, and oil infrastructures, severely degrading Iran's military capabilities. Trump said he was disappointed with Iran's decision to appoint Mostafa Khamenei, the son of the former Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who was killed in an airstrike at the beginning of the war, as the new leader. He also warned Iran against further escalation and hinted at potential U.S. control over the Strait of Hormuz, a key route used for importing over 70% of South Korea's oil. Iran announced plans to expand missile range, power, and frequency as Iran's IRGC Aerospace Force commander Majid Musavi said missiles with warheads under 1,000 kilograms will no longer be launched, signaling a focus on heavier systems. Park Junan, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, a pledge of action by finance ministers under the Group of Seven served to push down soaring global oil prices and to prop up the U.S. stock market. Our Lee Jae has details.
Global oil markets and U.S. stocks swung sharply on Monday as investors reacted to developments in the Iran war. Oil prices initially surged on rising tensions in the Middle East. Brent crude briefly climbed to nearly $120 per barrel after reports that Turkey intercepted a ballistic missile launched from Iran using a NATO air defense system in the eastern Mediterranean. It was the second time Turkey shot down an Iranian missile this month, raising concerns about possible escalation involving a NATO member. However, prices later reversed after the Group of Seven countries signaled a coordinated release of strategic oil reserves if supply disruptions worsen.
And we stand ready to take necessary measures such as stockpile release. G7 energy ministers will take this discussion forward already tomorrow.
You saw the French declaration that we are now also keeping open the option of drawing on national oil reserves. Now is not the right time, but we, including Germany, are open to doing so in a coordinated process at the appropriate time.
Following the announcement, Brent crude fell about 8% to around $84 per barrel, while U.S. benchmark West Texas Intermediate dropped by roughly 9% to about $81. The New York Stock Exchange saw similar volatility. Major indexes opened more than 1% lower, but rebounded after news of the possible G7 reserve release and comments from Trump suggesting the war was as good as over. During a phone interview with CBS News, Trump said the conflict was very complete pretty much, claiming Iran's military capabilities have been largely destroyed, including its navy, communication systems, and air force. He added that Iran's remaining missiles are scattered and that its drones and drone manufacturing facilities are being destroyed across the country. Lee Jae, Arirang News.
And the benchmark KOSPI index drove ahead a regional rebound as global oil prices eased and Wall Street gained. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon covers the day's trade and more.
South Korea's benchmark KOSPI closed at 5,532.59 on Tuesday, up 5.35% from the day before, showing heavy swings that even triggered a buy-side sidecar in early trading. This is significant as it followed a steep decline that triggered a circuit breaker just the day before. The gains came amid remarks from U.S. President Donald Trump hinting that the conflict between the United States and Iran was very complete. Since Operation Epic Fury began early this month, the benchmark KOSPI has shown extreme fluctuations, triggering both sell-side and buy-side sidecars nearly every trading day. After closing at 5,791.91 on March 3rd, the index plunged 12.06% the next day to 5,093.54. It then rebounded 9.63% on March 5th to 5,583.90. Of the 9 sidecars, 5 were sell-side halts triggered during steep market declines, while 4 were buy-side ones activated during rapid rebounds. The volatility continued with a 5.96% drop on Monday to 5,251.87 before surging on Tuesday. Experts say the severe stock volatility is closely tied to the $1 exchange rate as well, with the greenback also fluctuating sharply amid the geopolitical crisis.
The South Korean stock market is an inefficient market dominated by foreign investors who account for about 35% and act as major players. When they buy, stock prices rise, and when they pull out to realize profits, prices fall.
Meanwhile, the Korean won is also fluctuating as it recovered on Tuesday after the exchange rate touched 1,500 won against the dollar at one point during the recent turmoil. With the same reasoning behind the KOSPI's moves, the won closed at 1,469.31 per dollar, down 26.2 won from the day before. 김도연, Arirang News.
Also, on the local front, President Lee Jae-myung has highlighted the importance of preparation and related action in response to the situation in the Middle East to cushion the blow of a broader economic fallout. Our Blue House correspondent Song Yoo-jin reports.
As tensions in the Middle East enter their second week following the U.S. military strikes on Iran, President Lee Jae-myung told his cabinet that their role is more critical than ever.
과거 어느 때보다도 더 절박하게 또 충실하게 최선을 다하면 지금의 상황을 더 나은 상황으로 만들 수 있다.
Presiding over a cabinet meeting on Tuesday, Lee said stabilizing prices is the government's most urgent task as uncertainty grows in energy supplies, logistics, and financial markets. The government plans to introduce a temporary price ceiling on petroleum products within the week. President Lee instructed the finance minister to ensure the measure minimizes the burden on customers.
생산 원가가 올랐다. 그거 하면 그 시점에는 다시 또 최고 가격을 변경해야 되는데 기존에 이미 한 열흘 이상 이렇게 이미 올려받은 부분, 그 부분을 고려해서 실제 유가가 오르더라도 그때 바로 최고 가격을 올리지 말고.
He proposed imposing a price cap during last week's extraordinary cabinet meeting. He warned of possible price gouging by oil refiners, citing rising fuel prices despite South Korea holding petroleum reserves equivalent to 7 months of supply. The Fair Trade Commission has launched an investigation into possible collusion among refiners. The president even mentioned preparing a supplementary budget to ease the burden on consumers if the Middle East situation drags on.
We could consider cutting fuel taxes on gasoline by another 10% or increasing direct support. A combination of such measures could help ease polarization while protecting people's livelihoods.
이번에 어차피 조기에 추경을 해야 될 상황인 것 같으니까. 지금 재정 지원이나 소상공인 지원이나 뭐 한계 기업들 지원인 뭐 등등 할래도 좀 추가의 재정이.
South Korea currently maintains a 7% tax cut on gasoline, with the maximum reduction capped at 37%. These discussions come as the Blue House has designated this week as an all-out response week to address developments in the Middle East with a focus on public safety and economic stability. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
In other news now, South Korea's gross national income per capita rose last year, but the rise was limited in light of a weaker won. According to the Bank of Korea, the GNI per capita amounted to $36,855 in 2025, up 0.3% on year. The figure has been on an upward trend for 3 years in a row. Nominal GDP grew over 4% in terms of the local currency, but the weaker won translates to a 0.1% decline in dollar terms. Accordingly, South Korea's sum hovers below Taiwan's GNI per capita, which stands in the $45,000 range, as well as Japan's, which is in the $38,000 range. North Korea's Kim Yo-jong has denounced the annual ROK-U.S. defense drills currently underway, calling them a rehearsal for war that will hurt regional security. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung reports.
Kim Yo-jong, the sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and a department director of the ruling Workers' Party of Korea, warned on Tuesday about the joint military drills between South Korea and the U.S. In a statement carried by the Korean Central News Agency, she said hostile forces' military demonstrations near the regime's sovereign and security areas could lead to unimaginably terrible consequences. Calling the drills a provocative and aggressive war rehearsal, Kim said that regardless of any justification or adjustments, the exercise remains a large-scale, high-intensity war drill. Citing current global geopolitical crises and international conflicts, she added that such actions by enemy states should be met not with proportional responses, but with an overwhelmingly powerful and preemptive offensive. An expert said the remarks appear to be sending a message to the U.S. after it strikes on Iran.
It warns about the U.S.-South Korea joint military exercises, but indirectly it is also sending a message that, unlike Iran, North Korea would immediately retaliate with nuclear weapons if attacked.
Referring to what North Korean leader Kim Jong-un previously said, his sister again stressed the regime's law and iron principle that the strongest offensive capability is the most reliable deterrent. The expert added that while there could be provocations during the drills, they are unlikely to be serious.
It indirectly suggests that North Korea may stage a show of force if U.S. strategic assets are deployed to the Korean peninsula during the joint exercises. The provocation would most likely be launching a ballistic missile, with stronger provocation like an ICBM considered less likely.
South Korea and the U.S. began the annual springtime joint drills, Freedom Shield, starting Monday. The number of troops participating in the exercise is similar to last year, though the number of field training exercises has more than halved to 22 from 51 last year. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
And North Korea's Kim Jong-un has thanked his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping for the latter's congratulations in light of the former's reappointment as General Secretary of the ruling Workers' Party. According to the regime state media on this Tuesday, Kim sent a message the day prior, sharing his deep gratitude for the acknowledgement. He also spoke of advancements in their, quote, common socialist cause amid the demands of a new era. Back here on the local front, a contentious labor law takes effect today amid sharply divergent views between business groups and labor unions. Our political correspondent Moon Hae-ryun explains.
South Korea's controversial so-called yellow envelope law took effect on Tuesday after a 6-month preparation period, bringing major changes to labor relations and collective bargaining. The revised labor law expands the definition of an employer and the scope of labor disputes, while limiting companies' ability to claim damages from workers involved in strikes. One of the most significant changes strengthens responsibility for subcontracted workers. Under the new rules, parent companies may be required to negotiate with subcontractor unions if they are found to exercise substantial control over those workers' conditions such as working hours and methods. Previously, negotiations were generally limited to unions representing workers directly employed by a company. The law also broadens the definition of labor disputes. In addition to decisions directly setting working conditions, disputes can now include management decisions that significantly affect them, such as restructuring or layoffs tied to overseas investment or factory expansion. The government says it spent the past 6 months preparing implementation guidelines and manuals to help companies and unions adjust to the new system. However, the law remains controversial. Business groups warn it could increase labor disputes, arguing that uncertainty over who qualifies as an employer may trigger conflicts at work sites. Labor groups, while welcoming the law, says it still falls short of fully guaranteeing bargaining rights. On the first day of implementation, several labor groups staged rallies and press conferences across Seoul, demanding direct negotiations with parent companies. Unions representing delivery workers, airport subcontractors, and university cleaners called on what they described as the real employers to come to the bargaining table. During a speech marking the 80th anniversary of the Federation of Korean Trade Unions, President Lee Jae-myung said he hopes the law will serve as a starting point for subcontracted workers and parent companies to resolve disputes through dialogue and compromise. The Labour Ministry expects some confusion in the early stages of implementation and says it will provide continued support. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, quite a number of K-pop industry heavyweights have been included in this year's Billboard Global Power Players list. The list applauds the efforts of individuals outside of the U.S. and includes HYBE chairman Bang Si-hyuk, JYP Entertainment founder Park Jin-young, SM Entertainment co-CEOs Chang Chol-hyuk and Tak Young-jun, as well as Kakao Entertainment co-CEO Joseph Chang. Both Chang and Bang are on the list for the 5th time. And as the adage goes, old is gold, and young Koreans are now turning to traditional therapeutic practices as modern wellness options. Our Cho Young-in files this report.
Opening the door, a slightly smoky herb scent of mugwort fills the air. The shop specializes in traditional Korean Moxibustion therapy, which uses heat and smoke of burning mugwort. Customers lie on treatment beds, relaxing as the heated mugwort is first placed beneath their feet. The therapy continues with fumigation treatment along the back before mechanical Moxibustion devices are set on the stomach to deliver steady warmth.
My hands and feet tend to get cold, and I often feel tired. I heard mugwort Moxibustion is good for your health, so I looked for a place near my home and decided to try it.
Nearby, a rice enzyme spa, once mainly enjoyed by older generations, now offers another popular wellness experience for younger visitors. Here, people bury themselves in warm fermented rice bran, leaving only their faces exposed. The heat generated from fermentation is believed to help detoxify the body, improve blood circulation, and strengthen the immunity system.
In the past, most visitors were older people. But these days, many younger customers are coming too, after seeing it on social media or YouTube.
Spaces like this are redefining traditional therapy as a modern healing experience to recharge both the body and mind. Experts say the trend reflects how the digitally native generation treat traditional wellness practices as shareable experiences.
Nowadays, when people see something on social media that's said to be good for their health, they want to try it themselves. Experience-based consumption has become a major trend.
The relatively affordable price of these activities has helped them emerge as a cost-effective wellness experience. As younger generations explore new ways to care for their health, traditional health practices are finding new life in Korea today. Cho Young-in, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. In Lebanon, around 700,000 people have been forced to flee their homes as fighting between Israel and Hezbollah enters its second week. The Lebanese Health Ministry reports that Israeli attacks have killed nearly 500 people. Airstrikes on Monday hit 5 branches of a Hezbollah-linked financial institution in Beirut's southern suburbs, following Israeli evacuation orders for the area. UNICEF confirms that the displaced in Lebanon include 200,000 children. Meanwhile, Hezbollah fired missiles towards central Israel, triggering air raid sirens in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. In the U.S., federal prosecutors on Monday charged 2 Pennsylvania men with terrorism-related crimes following an attempted bombing near the New York City mayor's official residence. 18-year-old Emir Ballet and 19-year-old Ibrahim Kayumi traveled to Manhattan on Saturday to target an anti-Islam rally at Gracie Mansion. According to federal court records, both suspects cited the Islamic State as their inspiration and expressed intent to carry out a large-scale attack. Police intercepted the improvised explosive devices, which contained explosive substance TATP. Mayor Zoran Mamdani, who was not home during the incident, condemned the violence and said that New York City will not tolerate terrorism. AI giant Anthropic has filed a lawsuit to block the Pentagon from placing the company on a national security blacklist. The legal action on Monday follows Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's decision to designate Anthropic as a supply chain risk after the company refused to remove guardrails against using its AI for autonomous weapons. Anthropic argues the designation violates its free speech and due process rights. The Pentagon maintains that U.S. law, not private companies, determines the use of AI for national defense. Los Angeles police arrested a 35-year-old woman on Monday after she allegedly fired a rifle at pop star Rihanna's gated estate. Authorities responded to reports of 10 gunshots in the Beverly Hills area on Sunday afternoon and recovered a weapon at the scene. Investigators found at least 5 bullet holes in the front gate of the property, though no injuries were reported. The suspect, identified in news reports as Ivana Ortiz, remains in custody on suspicion of attempted murder with bail set at $10 million. It remains unclear if Rihanna or her family were inside the residence at the time. Police have not yet established a motive or a known connection between the suspect and the pop star. Chu Ji-han, Arirang News.
Dust that flowed in from overseas yesterday, combined with locally generated pollution, has been lingering due to stagnant air. And ultrafine dust levels stayed at bad levels across most regions today, and the haze could linger into tomorrow. Meanwhile, the Gyeongsangdo region is having very dry conditions. Dry weather advisories have been issued for parts of the region, including Daegu and Busan. And you know, what's up with the temperatures? Mornings still feel winter-like with sub-zero temperatures. And even tomorrow, Seoul, Daegu, and Gwangju will begin the day at just 0 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 8 degrees under cloudier skies, Daejeon topping out at 9 degrees Celsius. Now, temperatures will go up higher as the week goes on with wide daily temperature swings, so take care. With that in mind, here's a look at the international weather conditions.
Right, those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. As always, thank you for watching.
서양 요리는 오직 하나의 주인공을 위한 무대입니다. 완벽하게 계산된 정물화 같죠. 그런데 한식은 밥과 찬이 어우러져 완성되는 한상이 더 중요해요. 마치 자연을 한 폭에 담은 풍경을 같달까요?
요리사인 저도 한국 음식에 대해서 제대로 모르는 거예요.
향이 미쳤다.
저도 맛보고 싶어요. 알면 알수록 과학적이고 이렇게 하면 할수록 제가 더 빠져드는 거예요.
온다. 엄청 왔다. 같이 여행을 한번 떠나보시죠.
Curious about Korea? And especially K-food? How familiar are you with Korean food? The sea on 3 sides, a mountainous terrain, and 4 distinct seasons. Thanks to these conditions, Korean cuisine bursts with diverse and unique flavors.
Do you prefer sweet or spicy?
A meat lover or a seafood connoisseur?
Can't decide.
There's got to be something here that you like.
For Koreans, rice is foundational. It's a staple and the centerpiece to all meals in Korea. There's bibimbap, rice mixed with vegetables, gukbap, rice in hot soup, and kimbap is the demand around the world.
For me, it's noodles over rice. Korea has amazing noodle dishes. Chuyi ramen and cold naengmyeon to blow away the heat. A meat lover here, pork, beef, chicken, I like them all. Did you know that bulgogi is listed in the English dictionary? There's also the famous chimek, chicken and beer, which is the best combo for a night out with friends.
Surrounded by the sea on 3 sides, Korea has a great selection of seafood, from raw fish to piping hot seafood soups. It's mouth-watering just talking about it. The 2 pillars of Korean condiments, gochujang and soy sauce.
Ooh, what do you prefer?
Gochujang. I like anything made with gochujang. In general, Koreans love spicy food.
I prefer the soy sauce base. There's something about the salty and sweet that hits the right spot. I think even those who are trying Korean food for the first time will really like it.
But that's not all.
We can't leave out the street food. If you're in Korea, it's a must-try. They are both treats for your eyes and mouth.
How about it? Mouth-watering, right?
Korean food, you've got to try it. Discover a whole new world of flavors.
Held its first debate over the weekend.
The economy is expected to expand 2.5% this year.
Boosting Korea's ties with its global partners on the sidelines of the status UN summit. A massive drone attack on Ukraine overnight on Monday and Tuesday.
Arirang.
On Press Perspective today, we touch upon the impact of the volatile geopolitical landscape on stability here on the Korean Peninsula. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Tuesday, March 10th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. Seoul and Washington kicked off their annual defense drills earlier this week, and Pyongyang has been quick to denounce them. For more on this, as well as the ongoing unrest in the Middle East, I have Shreyaz Reddy with NK News live on the line. Shreyaz, welcome back.
Thank you.
I also have Professor Pan Gil-chu at the Korea National Diplomatic Academy joining us virtually as well. Professor Pan, as always, it's great to have you on.
Hello, good to be here.
Shreyaz, we'll start with you. Let's begin here in this part of the world, Shreyaz, where South Korea and the U.S. have kicked off their annual all-domain military exercise, while the Trump administration, of course, also advances its military mission against Iran. Let's start then with the latest drill here and its timing, Shreyaz.
Well, the annual Freedom Shield exercise, it was already scheduled before the Iran situation, of course, but takes on some added significance in terms of both the U.S. situation as well as the current situation on the Korean Peninsula. The drills began yesterday and they'll continue until the 19th. And they largely revolve around computer simulations and are designed to test the allies' joint capabilities while incorporating evolving war scenarios as well as different kinds of security challenges. Now, alongside these, there will also be a field training program, Warrior Shield. But one notable difference is this time the number of field exercises has dropped from 51 last year to 22. This appears to be aimed at reducing tensions with North Korea, but so far it doesn't seem to be working, as the North Korean leader's sister Kim Yo-jong has already condemned the drills as war exercises targeting North Korea. And they also reference the global security situation, saying that amid the collapse of the global security architecture at the hands of lawless international hooligans, referring to the US and its allies, these military demonstrations essentially are could lead to consequences too terrible to imagine, a veiled threat aimed at the US and South Korea. But from South Korea's perspective, of course, there are other challenges, other questions that remain, specifically with the US positioning a lot of its military forces in the Middle East. How much is it ready to really commit to these exercises? At this point, we haven't really seen details suggesting that there have been major changes or a decrease in the number of troops and activities involved. But certainly they seem to be a little scaled down in general.
Right. I'd like to expand on what Shreyaz just talked about, Professor Ban. The annual exercise this particular year comes amid local speculation of U.S. relocating some of its assets from South Korea, from here in the Korean Peninsula, of course, to the Middle East. I wonder, Professor Pan, should we be worried about such speculation?
Well, national security cannot be guaranteed without any worries. In this regard, worries are not bad things because worries help upgrade security measures. Meanwhile, how to carry out the Freedom Shield combined exercise will determine whether this speculation is taken seriously or not, because Freedom Shield is aimed at upgrading combined defense readiness. In more detail, it would be more important to prevent Pyongyang's miscalculation simply rather than to prevent the relocation of some American assets of the Korean Peninsula. If Freedom Shield turns out to be successful without any noise, it should function as an effective measure for Pyongyang not to miscalculate the current situation. In contrast, if Freedom Shield were deadlocked for any reason, it could be interpreted as a weakening alliance between South Korea and the United States. In this vein, both militaries should pay tremendous attention to fulfilling the inherent purpose of this Freedom Shield exercise this year harder than in previous years. With this in mind, there are two important things that South Korea should put more efforts into. If American military assets stationed on the Korean Peninsula were to be relocated for the mission in the Middle East, those decisions should be made on the ROK-US consultation, not a unilateral decision by the United States. The high level of consultation should be made under the fundamental principle that those
relocation is temporary, not permanent, which means that those assets are bound to be dispatched back to the Korean Peninsula once missions are done. In addition, which assets are going to be relocated needs to be reviewed by both militaries in an effort to ensure that those relocation does not weaken missile defense capability. The examination of missile defense readiness matters in a situation where, in the case of missile defense at medium and high altitude, South Korea should rely upon American assets such as THAAD. As of right now, South Korea is capable of independent missile defense readiness at a low altitude through several assets such as MSAM-1 and MSAM-2, as well as South Korea's own Patriot system. However, South Korea's LSAM, which is capable for missile defense at a medium altitude, has not been fielded yet.
Right, I see. I suppose we should also make note of the fact that the president himself, President Lee Jae-myung, he has reaffirmed his confidence in South Korea's defense posture, whether or not that particular relocation takes place. Shiraz, there's also media coverage here about prospects of North Korea's nuclear weapons drive deepening amid the strikes against Iran. What is this outlook based on?
Part of this is based on the parallels between North Korea's situation and Iran's nuclear development, of course. That's in the long term. But in the short term, there was certainly also a few reports highlighting Kim Jong-un's inspection of training exercises and launches of ship-to-ground strategic cruise missiles last week aboard North Korea's largest new warship. And this is something that Kim kind of emphasized, that the importance of the Navy's pursuit of nuclear strategic missiles or weaponry, and said that North Korea is making satisfactory progress toward this, suggesting that North Korea is very much pushing ahead with its integration of nuclear capabilities into its maritime forces. That said, I would also point out that these things aren't specifically because of the Iran strikes. This is largely consistent with North Korea's existing weapons development priorities, which came outlined at the recent 9th-Party Congress and has been continuing since the 8th Congress in 2021. That said, there still is, of course, an Iran factor. The current geopolitical context does drive home a certain message to Kim Jong-un, along with the killing of Iran's supreme leader, and in the context of last year's Operation Midnight Hammer, which disrupted Iran's main nuclear development sites. All of these combined would have reinforced Kim Jong-un's belief that the only way to preserve his regime is to have a nuclear deterrent. So in short, the Iran situation doesn't necessarily change Pyongyang's view, but it does help reinforce what they have been working toward for decades.
Right. And Professor Ban, what are your thoughts? Speaking as a scholar, do you suppose the events unfolding in the Middle East have bolstered North Korea's commitment to its nuclear weapons program?
Honestly, the strikes against Iran would serve as a driver for North Korea to put more effort into being seen differently from Iran. To put it another way, Pyongyang will attempt to send a message that North Korea cannot be designated as the season 2 target for Operation Epic Fury. If so, how is Pyongyang expected to get things done? Well, there are two key assets for Pyongyang to achieve this objective. First, alliance, and the second, nuclear power maximization. When it comes to the factor of an alliance, Pyongyang is most likely to send a strong signal to Washington that Russia is strategically located behind North Korea. In 2024, North Korea and Russia formed a new treaty alliance, letting North Korean troops to support to be dispatched on the Eurasian battlefield. In return for the dispatchment of North Korean forces to support Russia, Moscow has been attempting to help North Korea rise to a recognized nuclear armed state in the world, invisibly and indirectly, to say the least. To that end, in 2024, Russia neutralized the expert panel to grapple with North Korean sanctions while taking advantage of its status as a permanent member of the UN Security Council. Moreover, recently, Russia has reportedly delivered nuclear reactors for North Korea's strategic submarines. This treaty alliance between North Korea and Russia is quite different from the close relationship between Iran and Russia. The fact that Russia supports North Korea in any scenario could serve as a strong deterrent for Trump not to carry out another Operation Epic Fury against North Korea. In terms of the factor of nuclear power maximization, Pyongyang has been highlighting its nuclear status under the fait accompli strategy as a nuclear armed state. North Korea does not simply build nuclear weapons, but maximizes its nuclear arsenal. To top it off, Pyongyang has come up with a North Korea-tailored CNI, conventional and nuclear integration concept, and has been enhancing its second strike capability. In sum, unfortunately, the strikes against Iran have bolstered Pyongyang's calculation that nuclear weapons matters the most for its regime survival.
Right. Staying with that, Shreyas, an analysis by CNN says the events unfolding in the Middle East have set the stage for North Korea's Kim Jong-un to decide about how to engage with the U.S. Could you tell us a bit more about this particular analysis, as well as your takeaways?
Sure. So the CNN analysis fundamentally talks about how the U.S. and Israeli campaign against Iran, as well as the U.S. operation that led to the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro in early January, have shown how quickly regimes can be destabilized, how quickly authoritarian leaders can be removed. And CNN frames this as a warning to Kim. Now, one interpretation that came out in the analysis was that this could prompt Kim to consider reopening communication with Trump, even if only symbolically, to manage the uncertainty and reduce the risk posed by Trump's unpredictable mix of diplomacy and military force. At the same time, Pyongyang is likely studying the Iran operation to strengthen Kim's protection in more practical methods, seeing how do they manage to keep him safe from a potential decapitation strike. One factor, of course, that has to be borne in mind is, unlike Iran or Venezuela, North Korea does possess nuclear weapons and delivery systems. It has long believed that this serves as a deterrent against external intervention, particularly by the U.S. However, at the same time, the article does note that deterrence does not necessarily guarantee immunity, as the U.S. has shown that with modern intelligence and precision strike capabilities, it is possible to break through even the most sophisticated defenses and overcome those threats. One factor, though, perhaps that the analysis does not touch upon in as much depth was that this situation has also shown Kim that Trump and the U.S. may not necessarily be the most reliable partners for dialogue. They were negotiating with Iran before this, and mediators, at least according to mediators, Iran appeared willing to make concessions. So for Kim, there's now a big question. Should he try to mitigate damage by talking to Trump, or double down on the nuclear insurance for regime preservation?
Right. Staying with that then, Professor Pan, your thoughts. Do you think that dialogue between Kim and Trump are likely? And if that is the case, when might they take place? What might they discuss? And what do the two leaders look to gain from such engagement?
Well, in some sense, I am in line with CNN's views. To be more specific, North Korea's calculation could be changed, at least temporarily or tactically, because a massive military operation to target one of the axes of evil creates an imprinting effect. Pyongyang maintained a strong attitude based upon the logic of an eye for an eye or tooth for a tooth in an aim to achieve the final objective of its nuclear program. However, Operation Epic Fury compels Kim Jong-un to choose a Plan B option, at least temporarily or tactically, by lowering the condition to sit at the negotiation table with Trump. In particular, Kim Jong-un could be concerned that he could be trapped in the logic of FAFO if he does not comply with Trump's request to sit at the table again in a situation where he has already not complied with his request last year. In the Ninth Party Congress, Kim Jong-un suggested that the United States recognition of North Korea as a nuclear weapon state should be the basic condition for him to sit at the diplomatic table with Trump. In the meantime, Trump says that he can sit at the table with Kim Jong-un without any conditions. When an imprinting effect is taken into consideration, Kim Jong-un could sit at the table with Trump even without United States recognition of North Korea as a nuclear weapon state. In this case, this is not going to be taken as a nuclear negotiation, but simply a friendship diplomacy between the two leaders. If this friendship diplomacy is made, indeed, Trump could create a favorable condition not to lose the midterm election greatly by highlighting significant diplomatic achievements. Kim Jong-un could also expect diplomatic gains because a bilateral meeting with Trump can serve as an opportunity for Kim Jong-un to be a recognized world leader. Meanwhile, if those gains are effective, this expected diplomatic interaction should be made before the midterm election. In this vein, the Beijing summit between Trump and Xi Jinping in late March could serve as a valuable opportunity for the meeting between Trump and Kim Jong-un. Beijing is not a bad option for Kim Jong-un as a venue strategically and diplomatically because China is a longtime ally of North Korea.
Right, indeed. And before the violence in the Middle East, quite a number of pundits had spoken about the possibility of an interaction between Trump and Kim Jong-un in Beijing. Shreya, as North Korea, it appears to be open to talks with the U.S., but opposed to such talks with South Korea. I've been asking our panel of pundits in our program over the past few days with regard to this reality. I'd like your take on it as well. Why the discrepancy? How do you explain it?
It comes down to a lot of different factors, of course, but perhaps a couple of key ones are the relative power that it sees in the U.S. ability to make decisions and that Trump factor that we were talking about, that unpredictability. But if we go back, a lot of North Korea's current policies still stem back to the failed Hanoi summit in 2019, when talks between the US and North Korea broke down. And since then, Kim largely abandoned the idea that Pyongyang has anything to gain from engagement with either Washington or Seoul, and instead prioritized relations with longtime allies like Russia and China. But at the same time, there is this underlying belief that the US has the power to change long-standing policies against North Korea, both unilaterally and at global forums, whereas Seoul is unlikely to make major lasting changes without Washington's backing. And the other thing is, of course, it also may not have much impact, as South Korean changes of government often lead to much more drastic reversals of policies. When we're talking about the US being able to make those big sweeping changes, this is particularly relevant when someone like Donald Trump is in power, because Kim Jong-un appears to be banking on the fact that he is more likely than most US presidents to completely reverse Washington's long-standing policies, potentially make major concessions. But at the same time, of course, he is unpredictable, and I think Kim Jong-un will also be a little bit wary, but he probably recognizes that if there is to be a chance at getting something from the US, this may be the best time to do it. So for now, North Korea seems set to stick to its stance that it is not worth talking to either of these countries, for now at least, but it has left the door for Washington, the door open for Washington, if and only if the US completely drops the theme of denuclearization, or at least that is how they're framing it.
Right. Professor Pan, meanwhile, here in South Korea, the Unification Ministry last week called for a formal declaration to end the Korean War. Critics claim such a declaration will undermine deterrence. Could you explain this claim for us?
Honestly, we need to deal with this issue with three factors if deterrence is not going to be undermined. First, reality. Second, reciprocity. And finally, this calculation. First of all, we need to face the reality of how the Second Korean War has been deterred over the last 7 decades. A currently working armistice system encourages deterrence to work effectively, although it is not a final and permanent remedy for peace on the Korean Peninsula. Moreover, the transition from the armistice agreement to the peace agreement is not feasible for the time being in a situation where North Korea is reluctant to comply with even the armistice agreement. Furthermore, the declaration to end the Korean War could make the United Nations command weaker and dysfunctional because its key function is to monitor the Korean armistice agreement. In addition, a dysfunctional the United Nations command could lead to weakening the alliance between South Korea and the United States. Second, reciprocity guarantees peace and security. A unilateral declaration formally end the Korean War by South Korea could send a friendlier signal to North Korea temporarily, but easing tension could not be sustainable without North Korea's favorable response. To top it up, as of right now, North Korea is reluctant to sit at the table with South Korea by laying out a hostile two-state policy, as you noted earlier. Third, a lack of reciprocity could lead to North Korea's miscalculation. If South Korea hurries to take numerous unilateral actions just in an aim to mitigate tension on the Korean Peninsula, it could send a costly signal to North Korea. In this case, North Korea could take South Korea as a coward or a paper tiger, leading to military provocations. All in all, easing tension on the Korean Peninsula matters, but bolstering deterrence matters more. So how to mitigate tension on the Korean Peninsula should be made without undermining deterrence. By doing so, sustainable peace will be more possible and more expected.
Right, and hence the debate continues whether or not to declare a formal end to the Korean War. I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Professor Ban, as always, thank you very much for your insights.
Thanks for having me.
And Shreyas, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you very much.
Right, on that note, we end this edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow.
How to survive in Korea. One room. So, you're surviving in Korea? If you've signed a contract for a one room, obviously you're a pro. But the real deal begins